Welcome to the first episode of the Launch Lab podcast with Tom. The main topic of today is the most fundamental one, how to start a startup. Tom, can you introduce yourself to our audience and just in a few words describe yourself?
Okay, hi, I'm Tom Hewitson. I'm the founder of LabWorks.io. We are a conversational AI startup. We work with GPT-4 now, kind of lots of generative AI type stuff, making kind of conversational assistants. We're also one of the largest publishers of Alexa skills in the world, make a lot of voice games, and I was a student at City. I studied journalism and used that to kind of transition from working in journalism through to working in the tech industry, working at kind of Facebook and then the government digital service. And so I've kind of been on a journey from kind of what I originally studied in my degree to kind of working in tech to being an entrepreneur, and I've been a founder now for 5 years, and so I've kind of I've got some war stories over the years that hopefully I can share with you.
Well, thank you for this very complete introduction. Coming back to those war stories, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to start our first episode with you, is you are also a member of the Launch Lab, which I am as, and you give me a lot of valuable, all of those chat we had on the kitchen, and I find it very interesting, some of your war stories, but the most important part, and where I wanted to delve into, is how or why, it's mainly the why. You mentioned all of this technology, the GPT-4, the AI, and you worked at Facebook, but what's the difference between working on those technology as a founder and working on those as an employee or in a different kind of environment? What's the difference?
The big difference with being a founder is that you are kind of the last line of resort. Any job that nobody else in the company does, you end up doing, even if you don't know how to do it at all. So, over the years, I've found myself doing accounting, legal stuff, originally I didn't know how to write code. I actually learnt because there weren't enough people that knew how to write code, and that's what the kind of the company needed. It's the kind of the best and worst thing about being a founder is that you spend almost all of your time doing things that you're actually not really an expert in.
I love your point, but what I'm really trying to understand is why someone would go through all of this. You mentioned you are going into those kind of activities or work that no one want to touch because you are the only one. But why? Actually, my main question, if you want to rephrase it, is why actually be a founder? Why start? You can have better maybe quality life on work. Why go through so much pain? What was your case? What was your war story on that? Was there a triggering factor? Or?
I mean, you can definitely have a better quality of life being an employee, particularly if you're a high-skilled employee. I think you can probably make more money, at least, once you kind of risk weight it. I think for most people who become founders, it's almost like a kind of a spiritual or philosophical thing that, it's something that you feel you need to do. Most founders that you meet tend to have always wanted to run their own business, and it's kind of, they were just waiting for the right moment, waiting for the right idea to kind of come to them. And I think that was the same with me. I think I always knew that I wanted to work for myself. I just didn't have the kind of the right idea or the kind of, the stars hadn't aligned, and then kind of when the initial kind of chatbot craze took place back in 2017, I kind of saw that this was like a great opportunity because I was kind of working as a product designer at the time at Facebook, like previously I had been a journalist, and suddenly here was this kind of like class of product that needed kind of where words were the interface, and most product designers come from a visual background. I was quite unusual in coming from a kind of writing background, and it's something that kind of VCs, venture capitalists, talk about a lot, is this idea of kind of founder market fit. Before you get to product market fit, you have founder market fit, which is, are you the right person to be doing something in this market? And I was unusual in that I had kind of a background in writing, and kind of the product design skills, and then the technical skills in order to be able to kind of build this business, and not many other people could. And so that's why I was then like the right person to kind of found LabWorks and to kind of create this business.
Coming back to this point, I find it very interesting, the founder market fit. If I could sum up what you're saying, you're actually, would it be fair to summarize it saying that the reason why you started is like you actually don't decide to, you're just attracted, like it's just something you can't go against, it's like your nature. So are you saying that there are just some people who can't resist, but like being a founder, like the way I see it is more society being a big building, and the founders are the one kind of who do not fit in any room, and they're the one like hanging out, and just then having this whole startup ecosystem, and everyone that was like in this same vibe, but they were like attracted to this, like, oh, why don't we like gather and try to do something and work together and try to help out? Is it what you're? Did I get that right? Or?
Yeah. Most entrepreneurs are fundamentally unemployable. Like,
Love that.
What kind of makes you a good entrepreneur makes you a bad employee. And I wasn't a bad employee, but I had to kind of like put a lot of extra effort into kind of being a good employee that didn't come as naturally as kind of being a good entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs tend to be kind of quite excitable and quite kind of like interested in doing new things, and kind of I've always been quite lucky in my work that when I worked for other people, that I was able to kind of work on projects where they were new things. And frankly, they talk sometimes about this job role called an intrapreneur, where it's kind of doing entrepreneurial activities within a company, and in kind of the basically most of the jobs that I've ever had, I was in that kind of position, helping kind of them to set up a new department or a new kind of product within the business or a new business model or whatever, and so that was kind of I was always able to kind of play to my strengths, but I think if you are not able to do that, I think it's quite hard to be an employee somewhere else.
So does that mean that if you're unemployed, you would be a good founder?
If I was a what?
If someone is, because then we can twist the narrative and say, oh, if I'm unemployed, it means that I'm actually made for founder. Like, how do you make the difference between someone who is unemployed because he lacks skills and he needs to improve his skills, and the other unemployed because like he's highly competent but he's just getting bored? Like, how do you make the difference? Because for me, I can like play devil's advocate and being like, oh, okay, if I'm unemployed, it's just that I need to be a founder. Like, you see, how can you avoid being turning this into an excuse for actually? You see what I mean? Like,
I think that what it really comes down to is kind of like motivation and passion. Like kind of the skills that you have are kind of secondary. What really matters is, do you really want to do this thing? Because like frankly, like being a founder involves an enormous amount of work. I mean, I'm often kind of, working till midnight, and then I'll be kind of like up at 7 again the next day, and it's, it's a hard grind, and you can only do that if you feel kind of passionate about what you can do, or about what you're working on. And I think that I've never come across someone that if they are passionate about the thing that they're doing, they can't acquire the skills. Like, I think anybody can acquire the skills to be good at the thing that they want to do if they want to do it. And, I think that so much of kind of life kind of comes down to motivation, but I think that so much of like motivation comes down to like working on the right thing. If you're not feeling motivated because you're working like a really horrible job that doesn't give you any kind of, sense of meaning or flexibility or ability to kind of improve yourself or improve the world, then yeah, it's not surprising that you're not motivated.
So my take on that, on what we just discussed, is the main answer to the why take a startup is that starting a startup is one of the, I would say, for some, the only way of channeling their passion and their drive for a cause or a mission through technologies that they couldn't channel in any other part of society or any other way. Is it like, is it what it's down to, being an entrepreneur and being a tech founder, is like you're kind of the left of the society, like crazy enough to push and drive and being driven by something that only you believe, and you can only find fulfillment through being a founder and through tech. Is it what it's down to then?
Yeah, I think you're completely correct. That you kind of being a founder is usually or you go out and kind of create something because there is no other way to do the thing that you want to do, and so you have to go out and create it for yourself.
So just come back on the creating part. Now that we have covered on the why start a startup, how to do that, like on the creating part, how to create, like, I know it's a big, obviously the question is very big, but if we boil it down to a very more specific point, you talked on the intro about your background, coming from a journalism background. I'm myself a lawyer, and I think that I relate quite well on coming from a background where you're not used to coding or more used to writing, and the type of skills you develop are very different. Now, that's why you are a perfect use case. How do you actually make this jump? How have you, in your case, came from something which has nothing to do directly with tech, ending up learning to code, ending up working on it, and also understanding, because talking with a machine is way different than some way talking to real people. How have you done that in your case?
I mean, it's a process over years. I mean, I've been kind of working for like more than 10 years, and it was kind of like an incremental thing that I started off one of my jobs in kind of journalism. I was like an editor of a website, and then there was a big kind of redevelopment project, and so I was kind of seconded into the development team as part of that, and so I started to kind of learn the language and stuff in order to be able to kind of work with them better. And then that kind of, once I kind of saw what they were doing, I was like, well, this is really cool. Like, I want to kind of be able to do some of that as well. And so I started out by doing like a really kind of like basic online course on like, how to like write HTML, like, kind of, some fairly kind of like basic stuff. And then that kind of made me think, oh yeah, I want to like do a bit more of this, and so I kind of went and did an in-person evening course where I kind of, we used to go for kind of.
But you did all of that, knowing for the work you were doing, you needed to improve your skills.
Yeah.
But it wasn't to the end goal of start? You didn't knew at that
No.
time that you were about to start.
Yeah. No, I was. I mean, I think that I kind of, as I said at the beginning, I always knew that I wanted to run a business eventually, and once I had kind of been working in tech stuff, I was kind of pretty sure that I wanted to work in something related to tech, and so I thought doing kind of the learning to code. If you want to run a tech startup, it's really useful to be able to code. It's not like mandatory. It is possible to do it without, but it's a lot easier if you can code. It makes managing the developers a lot easier. It makes talking to investors a lot easier. It makes everything a lot easier. And also coding has this real mysticism about it. It's some people can code and other people don't have this skill at all, and that's completely not true. It's a kind of it's something that anyone can learn, and because it's a spectrum. I'm never going to be a great computer scientist that can come up with new algorithms or whatever, but I mean, these days, I kind of spend my time training AI models, and if you told me kind of 10 years ago that I would know how to do that, I would have laughed in your face. But everything was possible because it was all just building on the thing that I did before.
So the main take I'm getting from the answer, how to start a startup, is you don't really. It's just something that there is no actual, at least on your case, course or practical steps. Being a lawyer is pretty straightforward. You go to law school, pass the bar. Well, in the UK you get pupillage for barristers, which is my case, or solicitors. So the path is really broken down. It's there is very strict steps. In your case, what I can hear is that it was just coming out of you just embarked on a journey, being pushed by your entrepreneurial spirit and your passion, and you're just kind of ending up acquiring those skills. I would say, is it
Yeah,
is it the right take on that?
Entrepreneurship is a journey, and the skills you acquire to.
You're not born just.
No, but it's the skills you acquire to be an entrepreneur are going to depend on the business you do. So if I was running a events business, there'd be no point in learning to code, but I might have spent my time learning how to design flyers or something spent more time kind of working on graphic design. There's kind of I think that the best entrepreneurs are people who have an idea that they want to see happen that doesn't exist in the world, and they are determined to make it exist, and they will go away and teach themselves how to do whatever needs to be done to make that exist.
I think that's also my take on that. A lot of the founders I've met, at least the successful one, because we all know that there is a lot of noise, unfortunately, in this industry, but the great one, they have this passion, and you can feel that they are on a mission into something. And I know it's a very popularized, the case of Steve Jobs. I know that everyone is talking about him big genius, but when you actually look into his life, and I find it interesting the fact that he was adopted, and he's he had a very tough childhood. And I was thinking of it I had parents who were wonderful to me, most amazing parents, and I thought, what if I didn't have those parents? I would be driven on getting kind of recognition, because I don't know, life would have been so much different. And I just feel that for the case of Steve Jobs, maybe some assumptions, but I think that the fact that he had this childhood, or being adopted, and he has this passion and drive to be getting some part of recognitions that, you see what I mean, pushed him, he was on this mission, and he used startup tech and Apple to channel this passion. And I think that in the end, all founders, you need to have this very core part of your identity and being on this mission, whatever it is, to actually produce something.
I think I think you're right, but I think sometimes it's actually not that useful to kind of focus too much on, like, you know, the Steve Jobses or the Mark Zuckerbergs or whatever, because you know, they're famous for a reason, because they're unusual. And you know, it is possible that the kind of like one of the people watching this is going to be the next kind of multi-trillionaire, but the reality is that, you know, most kind of, well, most startups fail, but even like the good ones, you know, they might do well. They might be worth like 50 million, maybe 100 million, but you know, you're still never going to get like the recognition. And you know, like, I think if there's like a mistake that I often see kind of like first-time founders make,
let's go on this one.
it's that they try to, they're kind of over ambitious, in they kind of want to build the next Facebook or whatever.
So it is not a quality or a or being ambitious.
Being ambitious is great, but like you have to be realistic. Even Steve Jobs, even Mark Zuckerberg, they didn't start out when they kind of first came up with their businesses with like creating these kind of global behemoths. They you know, they were looking for something much smaller. You know, they were kind of Apple kind of wanted to build a kind of like a better personal computer, and you know, Facebook was just focused on kind of students. Like, you know, the most successful businesses, in fact, pretty much every business that's ever been successful, they start in a niche that they can kind of like own and understand really well, and then once you've got that kind of position of strength, expand from there. And too often you see kind of people try to tackle like a massive market straight off, and they just spread themselves too thin. It's like trying to boil the ocean. It's impossible. Like, you know, you need to kind of start with something that you can actually achieve, and this kind of comes back to the founder market fit. You've got to like be really, I think being an entrepreneur requires you to be like really honest with yourself and really realistic about like, what are the things about me as a founder that are unique? What is the thing that I can do that literally, like, you know, 3 other people in the world can do better than me? Like, you know, you need to really be able to say, okay, I am actually genuinely in the top like 0.1% of people for this particular thing, no matter how small it is, in order to kind of like, you know, find something where you can actually win.
I understand your point, but if you are playing devil's advocate, you can also twist the argument and think that it's very general. Like, if you are 18 and you don't have any skills at 18 years old, how can you apply your advice? You see what I mean? Like, let's say, imagine like this first year grad, or even myself when I was at law school, the first year I had no skill. I wasn't good at, like, I wasn't the best at anything. How can you first have the arrogance in some way, think that, oh, I'm the best in the world at this one? Even if it is the case, how do you measure yourself, second? And how do you do that when you are young? Like, because that's, I find you're interesting, but very, not really practical.
Well, no, I mean, the thing is that you know, the kind of the statistical evidence is quite clear that successful founders are much older. Like, you know, Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, again, like, they're famous because they were very, very unusual. Like, actually being an 18-year-old founder or a 21-year-old founder is a recipe for failure most of the time. You know, the most successful founders, the best age to found a company is 56. Like, and it's not that surprising. Why? You've got a load of experience, a load of life experience. You've got a load of money behind you because you've like had a kind of a career earning money. You've got a good professional network. Like, you've got all of the pieces that you need. Like, you know, you can't really hope to do that well when you're just kind of like 18 or 21. In fact, I think Facebook's a really interesting case study on this, because the reason that they were able to make it work was because they focused on a market that only they understood, students. And you're not going to get a 56-year-old coming up with a social network for students because they don't understand the kind of like the social dynamics of it. And so if there are kind of younger founders out there that kind of want to do it, try to find whatever like the thing is that only you and maybe your friends are going to know about, that kind of like people like me aren't going to understand, because that's where you're going to have the kind of the competitive advantage. But I would kind of say it is usually a good idea to make your mistakes on someone else's money. Go and work for someone else for a few years, like learn kind of what does and doesn't work, like whilst you're getting paid for by someone else, and then go on to be an entrepreneur once you've kind of got an idea that you really like and feel passionate about.
No, I was just smiling because when you were saying that, do something that only you understand better, and it's actually very true. Just a quick story before we wrap up, but I've got a friend who is a nightclub owner, and part of his marketing strategy is going on social media, but he has some of his staff are quite young, and he started advertising on TikTok. And it's so interesting because he had younger people on his team. He was doing way better than other clubs on TikTok, and the thing is that it was attracting massive amount of people, and obviously like the students. So it's so funny because it's true, like people are like, personally I find TikTok kind of boring, but I know that those like between 16 or like 22, some people are like spending hours on it, and why not leverage this time on actually trying to utilize and understanding people like who are using these products. So I think that it's not really down to the age that you have, but more how much you understand your customer or your potential niche. This was a great episode. We've covered like mostly the first part that we wanted to discuss, how to start a startup, mainly why to start a startup. We talked about your background. And on that, we're going to wrap up. I will see you next week for our next episode. And thank you very much for being here, Tom. Thank you. Cheers.